ring if you're ready to care. Oh, let's talk power, let's talk speed. Hosted by the one and only We Too Deep. Turn it up loud, feel the power in your seat. This is Slapping Me, yes, Slapping Me.
What is back? It is your boy, We Too Deep. That was an awkward intro. We'll keep it. We know we won't take it here, but that was an awkward intro. Yeah, sorry. My ADHD can't take that. We're gonna, let's restart it. What is up, everyone? It is your boy, We Too Deep, and we are back with another episode of the Slapping Meat community show. We got a kind of not a busy episode. Excuse me. But being that I just did one on Saturday and it's Tuesday as I'm recording this, it's not going to be super in-depth. A lot of the topics I was saving for this, I went ahead and covered on Saturday's episode. And I kind of told you on Saturday, well, here's the plan, right? We're going to talk about Dark Side of the Ring, TNA, 3-parter, thoughts on the show. And then that's the main segment. And then I was scrolling through our Discord page, which, plug for the Discord here. If you listen on podcast or if you listen on YouTube, wherever you listen, in the description there's a link for the Discord. Click that link, join the Discord, join the conversation about sports, literally anything, as we convert this podcast to a more open form, just anything goes type content. Literally, I mean, there's sections, keep, the conversations in the sections, but that's kind of the general rule of Discord, and most people should know. But we're going to, I don't know where I said we're going. I was going through the Discord, and a segment I haven't done in a while, which is a segment that I've kind of prided myself on doing, was questions from the Discord. For the last, it's 4 years of doing this podcast now, 300 plus odd episodes. Excuse me. 300 plus odd episodes, 4 years. That's one of the things that I kind of prided myself in attempting to do, is, as I'm building a community, is to, allow the community to ask questions that they would want me to talk about. And for the community as we build it, to sort of direct where the show goes, right? What do you like? What do you don't like? I've tried different ideas. Ultimately, it is, the We Too Deep entertainment. So, if I don't like something, or if there's something that I'm just not not feeling that, then we won't do it. But we know I'm all for trying different segments and stuff like that. There's one that I've been kind of holding back on trying, because it's one of these things that require, in the Discord participation. Kara had messaged me a couple weeks ago about doing a segment excuse me, on explaining the rules, and then doing this within the Discord on each person in the Discord represents their team in the NFL, and then we get to make trades within each, and it's a good idea if there was if I knew people would participate, I would promote it more, and because I think everyone in the Discord so far, Wavy D's an Eagles fan, B Master unfortunately likes the Cowboys, I'm a Patriots fan, Kara likes the Niners, Cody is still there. He's a Commanders fan. If I remember correctly, Highlander likes the Broncos. So we all represent different teams, right? And so, if I knew there would be participation, I would 100% give it a go. It can get a little quiet in there because we don't have a lot of people. My point in saying this is, if you're listening, you've been listening, and you're not one of those that I just named, join the Discord, join the conversation. As more participation happens, then more cool, fun stuff can happen in the Discord. But I don't have the time or really the ability right now to spend time to create these cool concepts if no one's going to participate in them, right? Like, for example, I wanted to do like a take what was We Too Deep Pro Wrestling that I was doing, but I stopped doing, and I wanted to turn that into sort of like a 2K version, because I know if you go to the We Too Deep Entertainment page, this is a long intro, but that's all right. We ain't got a lot to talk about. But if you go to the YouTube page, you'll see the most viewed videos are 2K Sims. And other than people complaining that I don't have the updated 2K, because I'm still on 25, right? 27's preparing to come out, or has already come out, and I'm still on 25. I never bought 26. I didn't see the point in it. But like, I was going to do that and create like a sim version of that, where like I have my roster and I just sort of put on matches, and that could be something that can create content on the channel during the week for people to watch. But we don't have enough people on the community, because essentially what I would want to do is for that to eventually turn into like, hey, we'll do four weeks. At the end of the week, we'll do a pay-per-view, or like a live stream, like pay-per-view type, PLE type thing, right? Where we get on, we talk in the chat. It wouldn't be like me on the computer streaming, and I wouldn't be able to do that at the moment. But more so, like, I record the PLE, edit everything, and then rather than just putting it on YouTube, I would set it to Premiere, and we would watch it live and talk in the chat and everything. But I don't have enough people in the community for that to, for there to be what I would consider enough participation. That's later down the line once we build the community, right? So the point in all of that, there's a long ad for the Discord, is tell your friends, have them get on. I mean, we could do different sims for, football. Right now, I'm big on FIFA because the World Cup. FIFA, baseball I play, and then college football right now are the three games. And I haven't got the new college football yet, but I'm thinking about it. But I'm the type of person that where, like, I have to be in a mood to play a game, and right now the mood that I'm in is FC 26. So that's the mood for now. With that, this wasn't going to be a planned topic, but let's just go ahead and talk about it. The World Cup is over, and I want to ask the people who are listening, like, Spain wins, which is cool. By the way, I know I had that episode that said soccer is boring, and I still stand on that. For the most part, for most games that you watch for football, or soccer, as we say, association football, which is all soccer is shorthand for. I don't know why we argue. Soccer is literally created by the Brits. It's to differentiate between rugby football and association football. And so you got soccer, right? rugby and soccer. And then you get American football, the three types of football, right? Again, before my ADHD kicks in, I know I had that video saying in that episode saying soccer's boring. And in most matches, it is boring. I still, as much as I enjoyed the World Cup final, that's probably the only game that I watched in the World Cup that I sat here and said, this is fantastic. I'm just being completely honest. Soccer is one of those sports. I just don't understand the strategy, right? The point of the game is to put the ball in the net. And I feel like and I get it's like strategy but I don't understand why maybe someone can help me understand this, right? There so many times happened during the World Cup where a team would have possession and they'd be at like midfield on their side of the pitch, on their offensive side, and they would have the ball, and in their technical terms, there wasn't a run that could be made, so they just kick the ball backwards. That makes absolutely no sense to me. I understand keep away as well at times if we're up 1 and we got the ball and there's 3 minutes left in the game. I get it. But even keep away, that's boring. Like, in football, like in American football, the goal is to put the ball in the end zone, right? And for the most part, in every game you watch, you're going forward. Like in American football, it would be insane if you threw the ball, if Drake May threw it to A.J. Brown, and A.J. Brown couldn't go forward, so he just lateraled it back to Drake May. You would ask, what in the hell are you doing? You're supposed to go forward, right? and so I just don't understand the concept of, oh, well, there's no run. So I'm just going to kick the ball all the way back to my goalie or to my defense, and we'll retry it again. I don't understand that concept. Makes no sense to me. The point of having possession is to score. So why are you not scoring? Why are you doing everything? Why are you going backwards and making it harder for you to score? That's how I view it. But with that being said, my goal this entire time, I've had three favorites in the World Cup. It's always the USA first, because that's my country, right? And I genuinely, people may laugh at me, I genuinely believe in the next, because the World Cup's every 4 years, I don't think the next one, but I think in 8 years, so 2034, in 2034, I genuinely believe that the U.S. is going to be more competitive. I think that there's a genuine, especially in the men's, like in the women's side, we've always been good. I'm a little concerned for next year's Women's World Cup about the women's team, because there's a whole new, fresh, I went to go check the roster, and I knew nobody, Megan Rapinoe, Alex Morgan, Carly Lloyd, all of the girls that I knew on the international team, they're gone. They're no longer playing. So there's a fresh face for the U.S., but we're still, one of the favorites entering next year's Women's World Cup. The American on the men's side have always been the laughing stock, and I think they haven't been able to get past the round of 16, and I think next World Cup in 4 years, that's the 100th year anniversary. I think we can get to the round of 8. Now, there's talks of them expanding it even more. So, this year there was 48 teams. There's talks of making it 64. Usually I'm a big fan of expanding and giving more opportunities. I'm just going to be straight up honest with you. With the World Cup, I thought 48 was too much. Because there's genuinely, this is one of those arguments that I will adhere to that James would make, where James in college football says, well, there's only 5 teams. No, that's not true. Not in college football. There's a good 10 to 12 teams that, on a good day, on any given Saturday, which is the rule of football, could win the national championship. In the World Cup in soccer, and the whole reason I'm for expanding to 32 in college football is because my argument has never been there's 32 teams that could win, but it's about equality among the conferences, where each conference gets an opportunity. With the World Cup, each region has representation. So I don't think you need to expand to 64 because there's not even 48 teams in the world that could genuinely win. Each region, whether it's, CONCACAF, I think I said that right, I could be wrong, or UEFA, or, the Middle East, Asia, Oceania, Africa, every region has representation. Every soccer organization, so FIFA is the head brand, and then you have the different, regions of the world. So you South America has theirs, I think, and then I know it's Central America, North America. I think that's CONCACAF, right? I don't know. Most of y'all probably don't know anything about soccer, just like me. But each region has their representation, right? And so that's my point of that. Just so y'all don't say, oh, boy, you said you're for expansion. 64 teams for the World Cup would be crazy because 48 was too much. I think 48 is actually probably because you're always going to have teams like Cape Verde. Cape Verde, let's just be honest, came in probably rated the worst team in the World Cup. Made the round of 32 simply by just not losing, right? They didn't lose any games, but they didn't win any games, right? They had draws in all 3 of their group stages, which allowed them, because of the luck of the group draw, they finished second in their group because there wasn't a lot of good teams in their region, and all they had to do was just not lose games. If you could just finish 0-0, right? And that's what they did. And I actually think they finished third. I think they got second. But had they finished third in theirs, with the way they finished, goal differential-wise, they would have gotten in. My whole point of adding this was, did you all watch the World Cup? If so, what did you think about it? And if you did watch it, I got to finish my thing because it was Pro Team US, that's first. That's my first favorite, right? Second was then Team Norway. Simply because the same reason everyone else wanted Norway to win. Erling Haaland. That and the chant. The road chant is fantastic. But I wanted Erling Haaland, who is just a beast of a player. I thought it would be cool to see him in this space because then third was anyone but Messi. Because in the GOAT conversation, if I had to put a completely ignorant point of view, someone from the outside looking in who's never really kept up with soccer, but if I had to pick a GOAT, I would put Ronaldo as better than Messi. That's the argument of in pro football, it was Brady or Manning, and most people had one or the other. And most were probably Manning fans during Brady's career, right? or who was the better quarterback, Manning, Brady, Breeze, right? Or Josh Allen versus Pat Mahomes. Now sort of like the big thing, right? And while most people would say Pat Mahomes in that conversation, there are some who would take Josh Allen because I would actually, in that comparison, I would put Josh Allen above Mahomes as a better athlete. Because I think Allen is a better athlete. I think Mahomes and Messi are kind of the same player to me, in that they were blessed with sort of opportunity, right? Mahomes was picked in a circumstance with really great players and really great coaches in a weak division for most of his time in the NFL. Messi being in Argentina, which has a good team, which has a history, so World Cups and all of that, international stage, Messi had the better team. I think Ronaldo, from a club standpoint, may have had some really good teams as well. I don't know off the top of my head right now, but like in the international set, like Portugal just doesn't compete with Argentina. And so, like, I reject the idea that, Messi has more World Cups. Well, he plays for Argentina, and Ronaldo plays for Portugal. Vastly different, right? But anyway, that's really why I brought up soccer for. And to bring up something about sports. NFL is back in the training camp this week. Camps start towards the end of this week. I think some reported today. But camps are starting this week. So we'll get more NFL news in the future. But with that, let's get into the actual things that I had planned for this. The first thing I wanted to, the rant of the week, because I didn't plan a rant, and I had one, and I'm gonna repeat some of the things I said on Saturday. We're gonna do a little bit deeper, not much deeper, but a little bit deeper dive into the Odyssey and the conversation surrounding it. Because I'm just going to be honest with you, this is one of those things where, like, I'm not a Christopher Nolan, like, slurper. I think he makes really great movies. But I'm not one of these guys that sit here and be like, everything he does is great. Like, I don't think this is the best Christopher Nolan movie. Pretty sure I said that Saturday. I'm still going to say Oppenheimer is his best thing I've seen. Maybe that's a little bit recent. I think some might say Dark Knight Rises. Maybe is it Insidious? One thing I didn't mention, though, that I don't think I mentioned on Saturday, was, like, the acting. Because some of the complaints is, like, the acting is awful. Which I just completely disagree with. The girl who plays Cersei, I can't think of the actor's name right now, had maybe 5 minutes of screen time, was some of the greatest acting that I've seen. One of the craziest scenes that I've ever seen in a movie. And very, very interesting. Anne Hathaway has a scene, and a lot of the I made an emphasis to say, like, my experience on X might be different than y'all's because I have a more conservative algorithm. But I've seen a lot of people complain that, this, one of the most memorable moments of this movie was towards the end. And just to give a little bit of the context to the scene, for most of the movie up to the point of the scene, Anne Hathaway is playing Penelope, the queen of Ithaca. And being that Odysseus has been gone, they haven't had a king for like 17 years. And technically she's not the ruler because she's a woman, and women didn't rule countries at that time. So they've just been sort of leaderless, but she's sort of been managing it from the outs, from like the from behind the curtain. She's running things, and she has a bunch of suitors trying to convince her to marry them, to be the new king. And she keeps holding out, hoping one day Odysseus shows up. And this scene that I think is one of the most memorable scenes in the movie, so many of these conservatives are like, feminism, right? It's a feminist rant. It wasn't. It wasn't a feminist rant. Here's my issue that I'm seeing with a lot of the opinions coming from my team, right? Like I said, everyone on the opposite team is agreeing with me. You know, most of the people who have seen the movie, who come and see it without a bias, enjoy the movie. That's right. That's how most movies are, by the way. And so the movies, it's not woke. And then the number one argument, there is one argument that really annoys me. I'm gonna save that for the end of this segment. But so it's like, Anne Hathaway, feminist, one of the best scenes in the movie she has, where she's talking to Telemachus, played by Tom Holland, and he's trying to, he's talking to her, and she basically says, he's trying to convince her to make him the new king. You know, I'm his son. If he's dead, I'm the rightful person. In terms of, you know, the word just slipped. It would rightfully pass to me. And she's like, you're not ready. You're still a child. And she essentially makes the point, like, I've been running this for 17 years. And is it a little bit anti-man? Maybe. But, like, that doesn't necessarily make it feminist. So, like, another point, like, the Cersei scene that I'm talking about, just to spoil, if you've read the source material, you know what happened in this scene. They're hungry, they haven't eaten in a while, they land on this island, and the crew's starting to turn against Odysseus, and Odysseus is saying, wait here, wait in the boat, and they're like, no, we'll go and try to find food. And the way Nolan does this is fantastic. Like, he's walking up to the house, and there's these weird animals. Like, I was completely taken aback, just sort of like, did I miss something? Because there was like a lion here, a tiger there, these random animals. And they get up to this house, and Cersei pulls them in to her house, and they basically say, she acts like they're going to take advantage of her. And they say, no, we're just hungry. You have food. Can we have some? And she feeds them the stew, and they start eating. And the point of the scene was to say you have this unstoppable appetite. And they sort of get stuck. And they can't stop eating. They try to pull away, and they can't stop eating. And eventually, Cersei turns them into pigs. And I've heard so many people say, see, feminism, they're trying to say men are pigs. Guys, Homer wrote that. That was in the original script, the animal choice. That's literally in the original stuff. Like, the original source material, Cersei turns them into pigs. The whole point is swine aren't really treated well in ancient culture. They're seen as dirty, and and the whole point of that scene is when Odysseus comes to save them, she makes the point of this is their nature. They're dirty, they're uncontrollable, and they're gonna cause you all to die. Like, that's the point. And I've heard so many complaints about it. Oh, it's feminist garbage, left wing, woke garbage. No, it's literally, right, which gets to my number one complaint. My number one thing, the number one complaint that really just grinds my gears that I'm seeing, is, again, most of these people are complaining because they went into the movie. As much as I'm not a big fan, even on my team, of someone like a Ben Shapiro, like, there's not a lot that me and Ben Shapiro are going to agree with. There's just not. Ben Shapiro gives a very fair, and quite honestly good review of the movie. And I'm glad he made the point to say, I didn't want to get pre-worked up about this. I didn't want to make an opinion until I saw it. Dave Rubin, same thing. There's very little me and Dave Rubin will ever agree with. For those who don't know Dave Rubin, he's a conservative podcaster, but he leans a little bit more moderate on a lot of issues that I would lean super conservative on. Again, very little we would actually agree with. And he gives a good review of the movie, saying, I didn't want to get pre-worked up because of these talking points the rest in the conservative circle are trying to tell me, right? Was the casting awkward? I didn't have an issue with it because I knew what Nolan was trying to do. And that goes into the number one complaint of the movie that really just grinds my gears is just the overall complaining on whether it's the cast or a term that's been used is like Christopher Nolan didn't, put too much freedom and didn't care about authorial intent. I have an issue with that argument, though. My argument with authorial intent is that the Odyssey and the Iliad and the Aeneid, which is also source material to this movie, they weren't written literature when Homer was alive. It wasn't like Homer wrote this down. They were poems that were retold orally. They lived in an oral culture. Most of the people in that culture could not read. They didn't have a written form of communication. They were oral poems and performances. And the whole idea was, as long as you stayed within the general accepted tradition, you can offer your own interpretation on, right? And so some people would retell the story with the focus on humility, or some people would focus on pride and its destructiveness. And that's all this is. That's all this is. By the way, something I found out. Y'all may not have known this. I found this out watching a bunch of reviews about the movie, because I like to see what other people are also saying about the movie outside of the political realm. Because I think if you listen to a political person give you opinions on pop culture, I think you're listening to the wrong people. I'm just going to be honest with you. Because they come with... So, for example, one of my favorite podcasts, Steve Dace, and he has an awful take on the movie, by the way. And he's one of these people that, like, I don't agree with everything he says, especially when it comes to pop culture. And he does a segment every Tuesday on his show called Pop Culture Tuesday. And I wonder, I haven't listened to today's episode, so I wonder if he talks about that even more. He put a video out on X yesterday, and that's how I know his take. But I wonder if he puts it on his show and talks about it more in today's episode. Some of his pop culture takes are good. But going into a movie, any movie, he did it with Supergirl, he did it with this one, and saying it's woke garbage before you see the movie tells me when you go and see the movie, you went in with preconceptions and you're looking to hate. And that's what I feel his take was he came in saying, Elliot Page tranny. They call them troons because they're afraid of getting censored. And they're trying to. They're children. A lot of them are children. They come up with high school insults. Look, I said this Saturday. I don't agree with Elliot Page's lifestyle. Here's the thing, though. As a wrestling fan, I think maybe this is easier for me. When I go into a movie, I don't live within the confines of regular reality. Because I understand that a director and a movie producer and a script writer, they're trying to create their own universe. That's what Marvel did with the MCU. It's what DC's doing with the DCU. It's what Vince McMahon tried to do with WWE, right? You know, if it didn't happen on TV, it didn't exist. Up until a certain point where he started getting more, like, allowing things that happen in real life. And to me, that's what ruins the product. Is, like, I want, like, the Thunderdome era, as bad as COVID was, like, the idea, like, I had an idea during that. I probably said it before I started. I think the Thunderdome was before I started the podcast. But my idea that I would tell to people that I knew was be like, well, if they're in the Thunderdome and they're the only thing happening, they should create their own Marvel-esque universe where we don't even mention COVID. We don't bring that up as to why this is the way it is. This is just the way it is. And this is our new universe. And we can, like, and that's how I would have gone through COVID if I was WWE. Was we have the Thunderdome. It's sort of like with NXT, right? They have the Performance Center. And so many people complain when they do like PLEs live from the Performance Center. I actually like it because I think they should have the Performance Center, not call it the Performance Center. They used to call it something special. The something wrestling center. I can't remember what it was. The Titan Wrestling Center or something like that. Titan Sports Wrestling Center or something like that. Before they sold, Vince had renamed when Vince was in control with like 2.0 stuff, right? And the idea was to sort of create your own universe. Things that are happening in this realm that only happen here and they don't care about outside stuff. That's how I view movies, right? And so I didn't go in and say, that's Elliot Page, tranny. No, I said, that's Sign-On. That's a character that has 3 minutes of screen time. Because now this whole thing, I think I gave this away, I think, on Saturday. If not, one of the other scenes that the character is in is when they get to Hades and Sign-On comes back and says, for those who don't know anything about Sign-On's backstory, I'll give it away a little bit. He wasn't supposed to be in the Trojan War. He was sort of volunteered. So Robert Pattinson's character, I can't think of the name right now. The character Robert Pattinson plays, when Odysseus was doing the draft for the Trojan War, and they show this in the movie, by the way, but Robert Pattinson's character was drafted, but sort of dodged it, and Sign-On, which is Elliot Page's character, was sort of volunteered in his place to go, right? And so then Sign-On at the end of the war, 10 years later, is the one that they use to sort of deceive, to convince the enemies they were attacking to accept the Trojan horse, right? To convince Sparta to accept the Trojan horse. And that is what happened, right? And so, but that character dies doing so, right? And so they get to Odysseus and them during the Odyssey, the actual journey, they get to Hades, and Sign-On comes out of the underworld. It essentially says, here's the little thing that was given to me when I was drafted. Give it back to that guy. Tell him to take his shame back. But essentially saying, you did me dirty, Odysseus. And so that's where I'm ADHD as all get out today, guys. Let me get back on my train of thought. What I learned while I was watching these reviews, if you guys remember the SpongeBob movie from 2004, with Mindy and Gooby Goober song and or Goofy Goober song and all of that, I learned that was a very loose retelling of the Odyssey. And then I went in and saw, apparently people knew this over the last 20-something years. And I just found out. I love that movie. But apparently it's a very loose telling of the Odyssey. Which I didn't know. My point of all of this is saying, and now we can get to my number one thing, is the complaint of authorial intent. Homer didn't write this down we can't ask Homer what he meant. Everyone, for the history of time, since it's been told orally, and with it being oral culture, we don't even know if what is written down is actually what Homer wrote or first originally came up for. Because with oral traditions, things get passed. This is why it's so unique, by the way, that we have the Old Testament. That Moses, in a time where most people didn't write history, then Moses would write the history of the Hebrew people. That we have written records. That is why the Bible is so unique. Because in a time and age, and the Bible was, the Old Testament, most of it was written well before Homer. I mean, we're talking 1,500 years, if not longer, before Homer. And stuff was being written down. It's a big deal because they just didn't have a literate culture who read things or wrote things down. We don't have a lot of written history from that time period. And so the fact that we have something is insane. Right? Just to throw that in there. But this was such a illiterate oral culture. We don't even know if what we have is what Homer kept. Now I'm seeing arguments like if you had to memorize everything and the audience knew everything, and if you messed up they would boo you off stage. I don't know if that's true or not. But what I know is what was written down, what we know today as the Odyssey, that you can get on Amazon. We don't know for 100% fact that was the original story that Homer told. My point in this is that the whole reason, so they show Travis Scott's character, and he's a bard, which is a fantastic thing because a bard was a storyteller. And what's Travis Scott? He's a rapper. He's a storyteller. He fit very well. Some people say he can't rap, he can't. I don't like his music, but some people say he can't act very well. Again, I kind of agree. But I thought he did very well in where he was because he was just telling a story and sort of song form. And that's how a lot of times these would be told, right? And this was Nolan's interpretation. But it also fits a larger string of his previous, at least 2 movies. At least Oppenheimer, right? So if you look at Oppenheimer and the way he told Oppenheimer, he told it as, or from the lens of Oppenheimer sort of building this bomb and then having to live with the regret of the destruction that it caused to the world and having to live with that. And that's what the Odyssey is. People may not like how it's told, but his interpretation of it is a soldier who spent 10 years at war, destroyed many people. He sort of has this sense of guilt over breaking what they call Zeus's law, which is treat other people how you would be treated, which is a very biblical It's literally called the Golden Rule. It's a New Testament principle. It's really an Old Testament principle. It's in the Law of Moses. But he thought that the Trojan horse was breaking Zeus's law. And Zeus's law is essentially treat others how you would like to be treated, and you have to show hospitality to everyone, because in doing so, you may, if you mistreat someone, you may be mistreating one of the gods in human form. And again, that's kind of a biblical principle. Jesus says, do unto the least of these, when you serve the least of these, you're serving me. We get like this idea of, with Abraham, he gets visited by who he thought were just 3 men, but they were really angels on the path to go do destruction to Sodom and Gomorrah. And that culture, it was expected to be hospitable to everyone. And so you have this guy and dealing with the guilt of breaking Zeus's law and being not hospitable. And it's just a beautiful story the way it's told. And to complain that it wasn't, the way Homer would have wanted it done, when we don't even know what Homer actually told, because Homer didn't write it down. It wasn't written down too far after Homer was dead. So we don't even, authorial intent does, because I am one for authorial intent. Shakespeare poems and plays should be told the way Shakespeare wrote them, because Shakespeare wrote them in a time where written literate culture was big, and we could tell his intent. If I wrote a book today and you tried to take it and make a movie out of it, and you tell a completely different story than what I tell, then sure, you can use authorial intent. But to say Homer had authorial intent when we don't even know what his actual poems are, because he didn't write them down, they were oral tellings done by bards through songs and performances, and could often change at times certain small minor details. And that's all this was. Christopher Nolan, the bard, telling his interpretation of the story. And so I hope that makes sense. And I had to get that off my mind because it's been annoying me with some of these critiques on the movie. It's from either people who haven't seen it or people who went to see it and went in with the preconceived notion that it was leftist woke garbage, and therefore that's why they couldn't enjoy it. I didn't watch it in IMAX. I could care less about IMAX, to be honest with you. Apparently it was filmed for IMAX. I didn't watch it in IMAX for one reason, other than I don't care. It's a Christopher Nolan movie. If you know anything about Christopher Nolan, and his movies are loud. And like Oppenheimer literally gave me a headache. That's how loud it was. This movie, I don't recall it being so loud, but I didn't watch it in IMAX. I've heard people who went to see it in IMAX say, hey, the movie was great. The sound was so messed up, but you could barely hear the dialogue at some point. But we'll finish talking about that. I got my rant off my chest. Let's talk about Dark Side of the Ring real quick, and then we'll answer these 2 questions that, in my intro I mentioned I was going through the Discord, and the point I was trying to say was there were 2 questions that were asked back in June that I haven't got to in a month. And Beemaster, I'm sorry, we'll get to them today. Dark Side of the Ring, 3 parts. I don't really have a lot of thoughts. I kind of already sort of knew the history of TNA, as far as the basic points. I think there's one major question that I want to talk about. But I think there are a couple parts that need to be discussed. So first, the clearing up of did Jeff Jarrett take Kurt Angle's wife? And because the way that it was, if you knew anything about wrestling, like, the way it was told from TNA and from Dixie and from all of them was Karen and Jeff were in an affair. And that's sort of the way it's been told throughout wrestling history since it's unfolded. And they set the record straight. Karen and Kurt had been separated or divorced by that point. There was no, like, affair going on, and this was sort of, the telling of it was sort of a Dixie power play. And that was really the point that was really interesting to me, was seeing the power play of what Dixie Carter did to get into power, and then watching immediately, like, she does the most money mark, they call her a mark on the show, which is great, but she does the most money mark, like, what I used to complain about Tony Khan for doing, right? When he started AEW and he was a money mark and he went in and just started spending money to get these big stars, these big ex-WWE guys, and he sort of slowed down on that and started creating his own stars. Well, Dixie immediately jumps into control, and, like, one of the first things she does is tries to get Hulk Hogan in. And she got taken advantage of so badly, because Hulk Hogan is not going to do a thing in the business. And Bischoff even mentioned it, that up until the day he died, Hogan thought that he brought something to the wrestling business, that his brand meant something. And I think Hogan didn't realize how much people did not care about him. I think that's why, like, when he showed up and got booed out of the stadium in his last appearance in WWE, I think that's why he was hurt. I think he thought that there was still that he still had some sort of branding and standing among the wrestling fans, but fans just didn't care about him. And I think a lot of fans just stopped caring about him even before he got brought into TNA. And so she gets taken advantage of. Hogan 100%, I believe, signed and maybe even convinced them, because Jeff Jarrett was convinced he was just coming in to be like he wasn't coming in to wrestle. He was coming in to sort of be like a PR guy, just like PR, where he would come in and maybe have a promo or two, promote some events, but he wasn't going to be like a center of creative. And then you put in Bischoff to run his creative once you sort of get him into creative, to being in the creative of the show. And you put Bischoff in control of his creative in a room with Vince Russo. And Vince Russo had to basically eat the shit for the booking and gets canned. And anytime Vince and Cornette are on a show together, that's hilarious. And I just that craziness, just great. And so that power play was interesting. But I left watching the 3-part series. The only real thing I took away was, had at that moment, if Dixie Carter didn't take over for TNA and sort of get rid of Jeff, if Jeff could have kept creative, kept doing creative, kept doing things his way, at a time, so this really starts, early 2010s, right? So you're talking like 2012, 2013-ish. And you're talking about a time, like how does TNA look different? Obviously, it doesn't rebrand as Impact. And obviously, it probably isn't owned by WWE today. But I have a genuine question, because there was a lot of momentum before Dixie took over and Hogan came in and kind of all of that ruined everything. There was genuine momentum. They had their own built stars. They had 4 strong divisions with the Knockouts, Tag Team, X Division in the main event, sort of, or not even the main event, but the main title picture, the heavyweights, right? And you had a strong brand. And then it all gets destroyed by Dixie when she cans Jeff Jarrett and starts taking over. So there was momentum. Heading into a period of time where WWE was at its strongest with Daniel Bryan, but fans were still kind of looking for an alternative, especially entering 2015, 2016. I always rip on 2016 to 2019 WWE being one of the worst years ever. As I was getting back into watching wrestling, TNA was starting to be taken over. And what would have happened if TNA was run by Jeff Jarrett during this time? They could keep up that momentum. And as WWE entered into a weak period in 2016, what would have actually happened? Would AJ Styles have gone to Japan and eventually in 2016, 2017 show up in WWE? I think there's a lot different. And the question really that I was left with was, had the power play not happened, TNA, the way I look at it after watching this, had the power play not happened and Dixie took control, I think TNA could have legitimately been competition to WWE in the way AEW thought it was going to be in 2019. And you can't allow AEW fans to change history. AEW fans from the beginning in 2019, the word on the street was they're competing with WWE. They've changed and said, our intent was to never compete. No, you set out to compete. But we knew by the way that you marketed everything, right? You came out and you wanted to compete. You realized you couldn't. And so then you said, we just wanted to be an alternative. No. I genuinely believe if Jeff Jarrett never lost control of TNA, there would have been a legitimate competition. And so that's where I'm at. I want to know what you all think. I know Wavy D has seen all 3 episodes. I'd love to hear his take. I think B Masters maybe watched them. I know he's asked about them a couple times on where the YouTube links are. I would love to know. All 3 episodes are on Vice and Dark Side of the Ring's YouTube page. They're in the Discord as well in the links. You can just search for them. But I want to know what you guys think after watching those 3 episodes. Do you think TNA could have legitimately competed in 2014, 2015, 2016 with WWE if that momentum was allowed to kick on with what Jeff was building? Because I believe he could. I believe he could. I think a lot of people would disagree with me that they didn't have the money and all of that. I think with the momentum they had right around the time of the takeover, the hostile takeover, I think with the funding, if all Panda did, if all the Carters did was just fund the show and didn't try to put Dixie in charge, and just let the people who know wrestling run wrestling, I think they had a legitimate chance of competing with WWE. All right. We'll end this episode with the 2 questions that were asked about a month ago. A little bit over a month ago, actually. And so they're a little dated, but we will talk about them. The first one is, do you think that if Roman wasn't in the Shield, they would have they wouldn't have had so many wins? Roman was sort of like the last op, right? Or the last pick. Apparently, CM Punk wanted that to be Cassius Ohno, or I don't know. Chris Hero. That's what he goes by in the Indies. If that was the case, I don't think it would have been as successful. I do think, to an extent, I don't want this to sound like I'm being a homer for Roman Reigns. I've always thought Roman Reigns was the best member of the Shield. I've just genuinely always believed that. So my answer to this question is actually going to be yes. Because I think there's only so much that Seth and Dean could have done, and I don't know who would have been like if it was Chris Hero as the guy that Roman, in Roman's role, I don't think it gets over as much. You just have a bunch of indie dudes who would probably do indie things. Roman brought a sort of believability where he didn't have to talk. Right? I thought as a faction, Dean and Seth doing the talking and Roman just sort of doing the action. I thought that was a perfect setup. Yeah. So my answer to this question is going to be yes. I don't think they would have been as popular if Roman wasn't in it. Even though at the time, Seth and Dean were probably the most popular wrestlers in that group from the fans' perspective, because the fans thought Vince was just forcing Roman down. But 100%, the Shield only got over the way they got over because of Roman Reigns. I'm going to stand on that hill. And then the second question was, and again, this is dated from June, but with the success of the mass versus match between mass versus by Gable and El Grande Kaiser, is it time to put a title on Gable? 100%. I kind of have answered this in different topics that we talked about. 100%. If I was booking it, it would be Penta versus Gable for the title. With the whole story being, I respect Mexican culture. I respect Lucha Libre. Finish this thing off. That's a match of respect type thing. So, yeah. I think it's time to put a main roster title on Gable. I would do the IC. I would then have Gable try to earn the respect of Otis back by offering him a match. I think this would be a really good place, by the way, for them to do that. And then to have the Vision interrupt and Otis turn. Because imagine, at some point, I think they're kicking Logan Paul out. Because Logan Paul's got to get set up for the match with Tom Brady. And so Logan's going to be gone. You're going to have Theory as the leader with Maxine. Right? Braun over there as well. Braun may be kicked out. I think there's a possibility with this faction that we could just see sort of an overtaking. I think Tozawa's gone. I think they're going to split that up. And I think Tozawa's probably going to be released, to be honest. But the way I would do this is Braun Breaker goes, does his own thing, starts eventing things and not being held back. This group, as much as we thought it was going to get him over, it's really held him back. And so I would have Theory as the leader with Otis, Bronson Reed. That's your tag team. And you don't necessarily need another person, but, I mean, you could have a fourth dude in the group. I don't know necessarily who you would pick. Maybe someone from NXT. We'll see. But yeah. I would like to see like Otis versus Gable in this match of like, I'm trying to earn your respect back. And Otis sort of turns heel that night. The Vision comes out and helps him win the title. That would be crazy. I would like that. So yeah, but Gable should get at least a small title run to me for the work that he did in getting El Grande over to leading up to that great transform. That's going to be match of the year for me. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't think there's anything that can be better than that. So that's how we'll end it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments or in the Discord. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Let everyone know about the Slap and Meat community and the podcast and everything. Like, share, subscribe. Leave us a review if you're listening on audio. And until next time, I will see you on the next episode of the Slapping Meat Community Show.
So hit that subscribe, come along for the ride, whether it's NXT or NFL time. Going in the ropes and forth and deep, Slapping Meat Community every Tuesday.